Today's lesson is all about evidence, appeals, and fallacies. Our objective is to determine an author's claim and how they use evidence and appeals to persuade their audience. So before we really get into you guys writing your own arguments with claims and evidence and appeals, we're going to take a look at some published examples. As a refresh, a claim is an arguable stance on a topic or answer to a question or prompt. So that means that it's not just a factual statement. An arguable stance has to be something that someone can argue. So it's not something factual like this is room 4012. An example of an arguable stance about the room is that this is the best room on the 4th floor. And of course, our claims need evidence to use as support. Something to note, on your guided notes, the blanks, I have underlined those words on the screen here just to help you with taking your notes. Okay, let's talk about evidence. Evidence is anything that a writer or speaker uses to support their claims. And we're going to talk about some different types of evidence. So we have 3 main types of evidence: empirical, logical, and anecdotal. Empirical evidence comes from observing something with the 5 senses to gather data. So these are like science experiments, studies, interviews, anything that you can see, taste, touch, hear, smell, and gather data from that is empirical. The basis of empirical evidence is experimentation. And an example is in a study, 54% of participants lost at least 2 pounds per week on the keto diet. Someone has done a study with a certain number of people and found that 54% of them were able to lose a certain amount of weight. Logical evidence is objective. So the difference between objective and subjective is more based on opinion. Objective is factual. So these are established facts. These are things that people just know to be true. We could go look it up somewhere, but generally we just know this to be true, right? Something as simple as like the sky is blue. We can look outside, we know the sky is blue. The basis for logical evidence is definition, reason, and logic. So some of those questions we've been doing is the do now, like is a hot dog a sandwich? Does a straw have 1 hole or 2? Some of you guys used the evidence to support that a hot dog is not a sandwich because the bun isn't cut all the way in half. And I posed the question, well, what about like hoagies, or when you go to Subway, that's a sandwich because it's called a Subway sandwich, but the bread is not cut all the way in half. So by your definition, a hot dog is a sandwich because the bread is not cut in half. So another example is when people restrict carb intake, the body turns stored fat into energy, which can lead to weight loss. So this is something that, they did studies a long time ago, and we could look up those studies, but this is just a generally known fact now. That makes it logical evidence. And anecdotal evidence is from personal experience. So these are stories, or what we call anecdotes, which are short little stories or snippets of a story. The basis for anecdotal evidence is personal experience. And an example is my friend tried the keto diet and lost weight quickly, so it works. All right, let's talk about reasoning. Reasoning is the line of thinking that the writer or speaker uses to explain how the evidence supports their claim. It is not enough to only make a claim and then provide the evidence and just let the audience figure it out. You have to connect the dots for your audience. So in order to do that, you need to provide your line of reasoning or your line of thinking for how you got from the evidence to your claim. Next, let's talk about rhetorical appeals or persuasive appeals. Appeals are strategies that writers or speakers use to convince their audience of their point of view or their claim. Go ahead and turn to page 7 in your binder, and we're going to take a look at this anchor chart. This is going to be a review for most of you guys. We know pathos, logos, and ethos. Remember that pathos is the appeal to emotions and feelings. It's an emotional appeal designed to evoke certain feelings in your reader. So this is when a writer or a speaker is trying to get their audience to feel some certain way. Some ways that writers or speakers use this appeal to emotion is through personal experiences, so including those personal anecdotes. They can appeal to positive or negative emotions, and through the use of humor and satire. So humor evokes feelings in the audience, and satire is a way to criticize something through the use of humor. And then stories like these personal anecdotes. An example of this emotional appeal is after a long morning staring at her screen, Sarah's eyes were bloodshot while her daily tension had begun to set in. So as we read this, we should be feeling sad for Sarah and having some empathy for Sarah. All right, let's take a look at logos. Logos is logic and reasoning. So this is a logical appeal this is a logical appeal designed to build an argument through reason. It proves to your reader that you are making a sound, logical argument by using evidence to persuade the reader. So you can use empirical data for this. You can use logical evidence for this. So we've got things like statistics. So we've got numbers and percentages. Facts, that would be that logical evidence. Research studies, cause and effect. So text structure, like cause and effect, or problem and solution. These are ways that writers use logic and reasoning to appeal to that logic in their reader. An example is a study from the Mayo Clinic shows that 27% of high school students will experience nightly screen time related insomnia. So we've got this data right here, this percentage, and that is relating to the percent of high school students who have screen time related insomnia. So some of these appeals work together with each other. This should evoke some kind of emotion in us. We should be concerned that over a fourth of high school students are not able to sleep because of screen time. But the way that the writer is appealing to our emotion is through the use of this logical fact. And last but not least is ethos, which is the appeal to credibility and ethics. Ethics is the study or the belief in what is right and what is wrong, or what can be trusted and what should not be trusted. So this is an ethical appeal designed to build trust and credibility. And it proves to the reader that you are somebody worth listening to. So when we're reading a text, should we believe what that writer has to say? Do they have authority on it? Do they have credibility? Or are they using sources that do have authority and credibility? So that's where citing our sources or giving credit to our sources comes in, because as high school students, we generally don't have a lot of credibility because of your limited life experience. That's why we pull in those credible sources to bolster your argument. Examples of the appeal to credibility and ethics is by using expert quotes, witness testimony, customer reviews. These are people who have experience with the product, and celebrity endorsements. And we're going to talk about fallacies here in just a minute. Some of these, like ethical appeals, kind of fall into these fallacies. The example we have is Dr. Robert Johnson, the leading physician at the Harvard Medical School, stated that screen time is becoming a national health crisis. This is a quote from an expert. So this is a doctor who is a leading physician at the Harvard Medical School. And Harvard Medical School is a prestigious university, a prestigious medical program, and we should be able to trust what someone coming from that program says and does because of the credibility of that program. The last part of our lesson today is going to be about logical fallacies. So fallacy sounds like the word false or faulty, and a logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that undermines the logic of an argument. So that's some kind of problem in the argument that creates this faulty reasoning. And we've got three different types of logical fallacies that we're going to talk about. The first is hasty generalization. Hasty means done quickly or without thought, and generalizing is putting like a bunch of people or things into a certain box or labeling them a certain way without enough evidence to support that generalization. The definition of hasty generalization is a conclusion based on insufficient or biased evidence. So we don't have enough evidence, or we lean one way over the other before we even take a look at the study or the claim, and that creates bias. In other words, we're rushing that hastiness to a conclusion before all relevant facts are available. An example is I asked two people if they like ice cream and they both said yes. Well, two is not enough of a data set. If 100% of the people I asked like ice cream, then I can assume that all people like ice cream. The next fallacy is either or. And this is a conclusion that oversimplifies the argument by reducing it to only two sides or two choices. We have this choice or we have this choice. An example is you were either a cat person or a dog person. Well, that argument doesn't leave room for people who have both pets, or people that have neither pets, or people that prefer reptiles or like fish. We're only reducing down to these two choices. And the last logical fallacy we'll talk about today is a red herring. And this is a clue or a piece of evidence or a part of the argument that leads someone astray. It's a diversionary tactic, so creating a diversion. It avoids the key issues, often by avoiding opposing arguments rather than addressing them. An example is, I know I'm late to school, but I did well on my last test. Well, those two things aren't related to each other. If you are late to school, then that's either like a behavior problem, or maybe it's something out of your control, like the bus came late or your mom dropped you off late. Doing well on your test is an academic concern, right? So those things are not related. That's everything for our notes today. Make sure that you put these in your binder as page 11 and you are ready to move on to the practice assignments.